using AWS S3 with Python. Now, you might be asking yourself, what is S3? Well, it stands for Simple Storage Device. It's a software offering by Amazon Web Services or AWS, and it really just acts like a hard drive in the cloud. So you kind of just think of your hard drive, that external hard drive that you might have at home, and how you're able to use it. Think of S3 in the same exact way. So this course is going to be very short and concise because really I'm just trying to introduce the technology and not really to go too in depth, as knowing how to interface with it will be useful for other courses that I offer down the line. So you can audit this course, or if you wish to follow along, I recommend you having a Python environment, whether it's your actual environment within your laptop or virtual environment. Virtual environment's obviously recommended, but either one's fine. Also an IDE such as Visual Studio Code, which is completely free, or PyCharm Community Edition, or even PyCharm Pro. Of course, you'll need an AWS account, so if you have access to one at work and you want to experiment with that one, or you want to create your own, definitely do that. And then of course, some knowledge of Python so that you don't get lost in the code and you can follow along, although like the code examples are pretty straightforward. So who is this course for specifically? Well, it's not necessarily going to be for a developer and an engineer. It's just really anyone who wants to know S3 and how it works and how to interface with it using Python. So if we think of our target audience, it's really analysts, data scientists, and business intelligence users that are having to use or incorporate S3 as part of their solutions. Now, what is the application for S3? Well, as I mentioned earlier, it's like a hard disk, like in the cloud, basically. So you can, it will, in addition to storing information, it does offer file versioning. You can scale your storage, so it's not like a fixed size. And if you want to get bigger and store more stuff, you certainly can. Whereas if you had just a hardware device, you're only fixed to what your hardware or your hard drive holds. It's also very cost effective depending on how frequent you need to access your files or how much data you store. And in some rare use cases, folks use, or not rare, but probably common, folks use it for hosting like simple HTML sites. So that becomes really cost effective when you compare it to the cost of other paid hosting, whether it's shared or dedicated. So what is an S3 bucket specifically? Well, think of an S3 bucket as a storage unit, and it can contain folders and files, right? And these folders and files are also referred to as objects. So keep that in mind, that a folder and a file both could be an object, or both are an object in S3. Now, one thing to note is that S3 bucket names are unique. So even if you don't share, like, even if you and another user have different AWS accounts, you guys will never be able to have the same bucket name. So think about that as you move forward in the course and as you start creating your buckets and naming your buckets. All right, so what will you learn here? Well, we'll become familiar with the console, and when I say console, I'm not talking about command line interface. I'm talking about the AWS console. We'll go ahead and set up user credentials, and then work with S3 programmatically using Python. So the kind of scripts that you'll be looking at, and even some of the console tasks, will include uploading files, downloading files, listing your bucket contents, creating a bucket, and deleting a bucket, and of course deleting a file. So with not much, without much ado, I suppose, we'll go on and get started with the next lesson. See you in the next video. Back. So fourth, I want to talk about the prerequisites that you need for this course. It's four simple things. One, you need a Python environment. So if you don't already have Python installed on your computer, or you don't have a virtual environment, go to python.org and you can download the Python version that you need. Let's go to python.org. And here you can just go ahead and download your release. The latest release at this time of this video is 3.10. But you can download really any release that you feel is stable. So we'll probably use, I think I have 3.7 installed, so we'll be using 3.7. If you have something earlier like 3.4, you can use that as well. The other thing that you're going to be needing is an IDE, right? So basically a coding interface, a development interface. Or if you're super comfortable with a text pad and just running things on command line, that's completely fine too. I'll be using PyCharm. There's a free version or community version available, but you can, or a trial version, excuse me, for PyCharm. I think maybe a community version. And there's also Visual Studio Code, which is completely free and pretty robust, so I recommend either of those two. The next thing that you'll need is an AWS account. So if you go to aws.amazon.com, here you'll see that if you don't already have an account, you can certainly create one, right? And so that's what I recommend that you do. Either create your AWS account or explore it a little bit. And here we'll look at the free services that they offer. So let's see, here we go. Free tier. I'm sorry, it was right in front of my face. So you can use the S3 technology for free for a year. And so let's take a look at that, what that means. So if you don't already have an account, go ahead and create your free account. And let's just quickly look at the various products that it offers. And one of the first ones is S3. So here for 12 months, you'll be able to utilize up to 5 gigs of storage, make 20,000 requests and 20,000 put requests. So that's more than enough of everything for what we'll be doing in this course. So go ahead and have that ready. And I mean, quite frankly, chances are you're not going to even get billed for like the little files that you interface or that you interact with for S3. So I don't know, you might get billed a few cents, but unless you're doing more than what's on this course, otherwise what's in this course doesn't really going to cost you anything. And then of course you also need some knowledge of Python. So just knowing how to install libraries in Python, knowing how to use the OS library. We're only going to use like 2 different like modules or libraries in this course, so that's actually sufficient. And then the last thing I want to actually kind of go back to is a virtual environment. If it's your first time setting up a virtual environment, then I recommend you don't, right? So you don't have to spend too much time. You kind of just install and work off your computer or use something like Anaconda, especially if you're on Windows. But if you are curious and you do install PyEnv, whether it's on your Linux or Mac machine, you can simply create a Python virtual environment. So Python, excuse me, PyEnv, since I'm using PyEnv virtual env, and here I'm going to give it, I'm going to specify the Python version that I want, and I'll just call this test Py S3 just for the sake of simplicity. And here it's going to use it's going to create my virtual environment using Python 3.7. And now that I have that, I'm going to say pyenv activate and then test Py S3, excuse me. So like now I'm in my virtual environment, test Py S3. Once I'm in my virtual environment, the only library that I'm going to install is Boto3 or Boto3, however you pronounce it. So I'm going to type pip install Boto3, and it should only take a few minutes just to grab that from online. Actually, I already have it installed, so it's not really downloading anything. And now I have Boto3. So now in your virtual environment, you can type Python, check that you're on 3.7, and I can type import Boto3, and there we go. I'm ready to use a library. So we won't be doing as many things on the terminal, but just kind of wanted to show what that looks like in terms of virtual environment and getting ready to code and everything. So anyways, I'll stop right there. But if you have any questions, just kind of replay the video at your speed and just take it easy. If you're curious about virtual environments, Real Python has a great tutorial on that to install PyEnv, and really it's primarily targeted at Mac or Linux users. If you are on Windows, definitely recommend going with Anaconda. That's probably the easiest way to kind of get your environment up and running. Alright, thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Alright, if you've created your account already, then let's go ahead and go into your AWS console. The first things that I want to talk today about are user groups, and then we'll talk about actually creating user roles. So I'm going to go to aws.amazon.com, go ahead and sign into the console. And here, these are the items that I've recently visited, so you may not necessarily have these immediately at your disposal. So you want to click on services and then scroll down till you find S3 or storage, excuse me. Click on storage. Here you'll find S3 and go ahead and click on that. And immediately, if you haven't created anything here, then your list is going to be empty. So these are my buckets, and if I want to create a bucket, I can create it here, and just essentially just have these storage buckets. Now, one thing about buckets is that if you name your bucket like example, right? The name has to be like unique across all buckets created. So if I type examples, chances are someone already created example. So once I do that, I'll just go ahead and scroll all the way down, leave everything default. And here we see that a bucket with the same name already exists. Now, one of the things, if you notice, like I don't have an example bucket myself, right? But the name example has already been created, so that name is already taken up. So you have to be very creative and meaningful at the same time with the name of your buckets. Right, so but before we get there, I want to go ahead and start and create like a user group, right? And let's go ahead and go to IAM or security and identity. Let's see where this is at. Maybe it's security and identity compliance. Yeah, here we go. Security identity and then IAM. We'll click on that. And the first thing that I want to do is I want to actually create a user group. So a user group basically is just that. It's a group where you can add or multiple users to, and this group basically will be or have attributes with the kind of permission properties, right? So if I create a group, right, I'm going to call it, let's say I'll call it OSK example group, and that should be good to go. And now here, I'm going to apply the permissions. So there are a bunch of permissions here because AWS offers like so many services, right? Like, Redshift, Glacier, which is, I think it's like another type of slow moving storage service, and so many that I'm not really familiar with. But I'm going to want to look for S3. So let's filter down. There we go. And so what I want to give my user group, and again, if you're working off an account from work, then don't worry about it. You probably already have the right policies and you may not have the ability to do this. But if you're doing it on your own, go ahead and select Amazon S3 Full Access, and that'll ensure that you have all the necessary access to do what we're going to do with our group. So okay, so I created my group name, selected Amazon S3 Full Access. I'm going to create group, and now we have an OSK example group. Great. The next thing that I want to do is I want to create a user and associate it to that role, right? So here I am. I'm going to add the user, and I'll say OSK group user. And one thing that I want to do is, here we go. I want to select this access key, so we can enable access key and a secret key for this user. We're going to need that those later, actually. You don't necessarily need to create a AWS management console thing, because that just means they can log online, but that's not necessary, at least not for when we're coding. Then I want to go ahead and associate it to this group, OSK example group. So then next I'll hit tags. Tags are optional, so we can kind of just ignore this. Then we'll review it, and now we have this username, OSK group user, right, which is my user. It belongs to this group type, which has access or full access to S3, and I am good to go with that. I'll just hit create user and success. Now I've successfully created a user, and I guess you can sign in with this information. We're not necessarily concerned with that. But what we do want, and the reason we went through this whole process was so we can get like this access key and this secret key. So take a moment. I think you might be able to expand this and download it. If not, you can, oh, here we go, download CSV. Download the CSV so that you can save these credentials. And we can have, this set of information. We're going to need like this access key and secret access key ID so that we can authenticate. So save that, and if you've done that, then you're good to go. And again, you may be working off of a work account, and you may already have like this access key and the secret access key, so you don't necessarily need to to go through this step. But in case you do and you're starting from scratch, this is how you basically gain your credentials so that we can connect programmatically using Python. So I'm going to stop right there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome back. So now that we have our credentials, we want to go ahead and store our credentials locally so that we don't expose our keys in our code, right? So if we save it or share our code with someone else, we don't necessarily want to give them our keys. And then B, it just like not having to type those out in your code just saves a lot of time and just makes things a little bit more cleaner and manageable. So let's go ahead and open up your terminal. I think this is probably the easiest way to do it. Go to your root directory, excuse me, not your root directory, but your home directory. And in order to get there, you can type cd tilde backslash, so change directory to basically this set of symbols that mean or stand for your home directory. And so here, and we just you don't have to list your folders, but I'm gonna list mine. So I have a couple of folders here, but there's some hidden folders, and you want to create a hidden folder, and that's going to be your .aws folder. So I'm going to type mkdir.aws, and I'm not going to see it here, but if I type like ls-al, I'll be able to see all my folders, and here I see the one that I just created, this AWS folder. So now I'm going to go into my AWS folder, and in here I'm going to create a credentials file. So like in my new file, it's going to, this is like my file where I'm going to store those keys that I just downloaded. And the first line I'm going to type default, right? And I'm going to type, my next line I'm going to type AWS access key ID equals, and then I'm going to open up my text file, and I'm going to grab this string here that corresponds to my access key ID. So here it's first is username, then password, then access key ID. So I'm going to grab that string and paste it here. The next thing that I want to type is AWS secret access key, and actually I can just take it from my browser. So I can go to my browser here and just kind of copy and paste this into my browser. Okay. So now that I have that, just type Control X or hit Control X. Save the changes, yes, and then hit Enter. And now if I want to just confirm my changes, you can see that I have that there. Okay, so that was my first step. The next, that's my first step in saving my credentials. The next thing that I want to do, not credentials related, but I do want to set up a folder for my work. So I tend to like store and back things up in GitHub. So I have a GitHub folder where I keep all my repository folders. So I'm going to make a new directory, and I'll just call it like S3. You can call it whatever you want, by the way. Yeah, and then we're good to go. So like now, this is going to be my working code directory. Super. All right. So take a moment to do those things. You know, A, save your credentials files, and then B, create a working directory where you're going to store all your code files. And then yeah, we'll be ready to code in a little bit. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. The next thing that I want to do is I want to turn our attention back to the console, and I want to do a couple things before we actually start coding. I want us to go ahead and create some buckets in our S3 location, and then in addition to that, like practice uploading and downloading files. Just become familiar with this very simple and hopefully intuitive interface. So I'm going to go to S3. You can navigate there through services, storage, and then go to S3, or if you have the shortcut, just simply click on the shortcut. And so you'll see here that I already have 4 buckets created. So depending on which console you're viewing, whether it's a work console or your personal console, you may or may not have buckets. But for the sake of creating a bucket and just kind of becoming familiar with it, please go ahead and take a moment to do that right now. Pause the video, and then we'll resume. Okay, great. So hopefully you paused it, and then we're able to create some buckets and didn't have any problems, or if you did, you resolved them and then just kind of got to know what it all entails and the naming conventions that you have to use and the uniqueness and all that other stuff. All right, so I'm going to find an empty bucket, okay, because I do have files across all 3 buckets, and this is just for an example of uploading and downloading files. So here I have this upload option, okay, and so as you saw, my bucket is empty, so there's no files and folders. So I'm going to switch over to my Finder and just kind of grab a couple of files here. They're just text files, and you can really upload any files. I'll provide a link to some of these files because they're just text files that I found online, and then I'll go ahead and put them up there somewhere so that you can find them and use these files, or really just use any file you have. It doesn't really matter. So now I'm going to just highlight all of them, click and drag, and here it basically says, puts them in queue and says, hey, we're going to add all these files, right? It gives us a quick summary for files and the total size, and then the destination, which is this specific bucket. Then we're gonna just click upload, and then we are ready to go. Now we have a success message and our 4 files that have been uploaded here. If I want to go back to my bucket, here's a nifty S3 URL. I can just click on that and then return to my main bucket and see that I have these 4 files. If I wanted to download any files through the console that may already exist that I didn't necessarily upload, I can simply select a file or 2, I guess just 1 at a time maybe, and then just download, and those files will and then that file will download locally. I believe there's probably a bulk download feature. I could be wrong, but anyways, you can definitely download it one by one within the console. Alright, so that was very simple, and I just want to let you know that the actions that you're going to be able to take today, you'll be able to take them through the console. So basically adding files, creating buckets, deleting files and deleting buckets, all that can be done through the console right here. If you want to delete a bucket, you can select it, delete it. And so everything that we're going to cover today is just really going to kind of cover the basics of what you can do through the console as well. All right, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Now we're going to get to the fun part, which is the coding part. So let's go ahead and spin up or start your editor. So whether it's PyCharm or Visual Studio, it doesn't matter. So you can see here that I created an S3 folder earlier through my terminal. Now it's here in my GitHub folder. So hopefully you have everything set up. If not, pause the video. Take a moment to make sure that your environment is set up right. That you're that you're pointing, or that you're using the appropriate virtual environment and all that other good stuff. If you want to make it simplistic and just do things on an editor and a terminal, then feel free. But just make sure you're set up and ready to code. All right. So one thing that I'm going to do here in my S3 folder is I'm actually going to create a directory. I'm going to call it data. I'm going to store some data files there, and then I'm going to create another directory, and I call it downloads, for when we download files from S3. We can have kind of a source to upload files, which will be in data, and then a folder where we'll download files. Okay, so but the first thing that we want to do is we actually want to create a new file, and a new Python file, excuse me, and we will call this, we'll number it 01 connect and list.py. So what we're going to be doing is we're actually going to be connecting to our S3 instance, and then listing the folders that we have, or the buckets that we have. Now, if you haven't already gone to your console and created some buckets, please do so that you don't get back an empty list. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to import our module, import Morioh, and then we're going to instantiate our client. So we'll say client equals Morioh dot client, and then S3, lowercase s3, I'm sorry. Cool. Next, we'll retrieve, all bucket metadata, and we'll do that by storing the response from client.list buckets into the response, right? So what this is going to do is actually going to retrieve, just some metadata, not just like the bucket names, but quite a bit of metadata. And you can actually print response and view what your metadata consists of. I won't go through that right now for just the sake of simplicity. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looping through like basically these dictionaries. So I'm going to say I'm going to loop through bucket data and display bucket names, just so you know. So I'll say for b in response buckets, because that is like one of the nested lists that it's in, print b name, because that's where the bucket list is located. So just go ahead and save that. I'll go over to my terminal since things are pretty large here in terms of text. Let me go to my folder here. Okay. Did I not save this here? Oops, I saved this in the downloads folder, so let me move this up one level. Okay. So now my terminal, here we go. So I'll type Python 01 connect and list. Here we go. So now I went out and grabbed the names, or extracted the names from the metadata essentially using that for loop. But I went out, grabbed all this metadata, iterated through some of the lists within that large dictionary that we get back, and then was able to list out my bucket names. So here I see that I have OSK bucket 3000, empty bucket, storage 4000, and then play. So if I go to my console, I see the 3000, empty, 4000, and play bucket right here. Cool. All right. Well, thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next video. Welcome back. So the next thing that we want to do is we actually want to upload one of our flat files up into one of the buckets. So as you saw, I do have like a couple of flat files that I retrieved from online. And I'll put these somewhere so that they're available to you, and I'll link them in a couple of places so you can grab them, or if not, feel free to grab any file that you have that you want to upload. You make it a small file so it can process quickly and not have it be too dependent on your internet connection. But anyways, let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to create a new file, a new Python file. And for this one, I'm just going to call it, I'm going to number it 02 upload S3.py. Okay, so for this I'm going to import like two different libraries, right? One is going to be OS, and then of course the next one Boto3 or Boto3. So let's go ahead and instantiate the client one more time, and type client equals Boto3 dot client s lowercase s3. Okay, now I want to set some variables, and this is basically going to be like my path variables and like target bucket name and stuff like that. So the bucket that I want to target is actually this S3 OSK bucket 3000. You may have a different name, so feel free to name it whatever you want. But you can see it's empty, and this is where I want to upload a file to. Excuse me. So I'm going to say bucket equals S3 OSK bucket 3000. And I'm going to set my current path to my current working directory. So I'm going to say current path equals OS get current working directory. My file, I'm going to upload this profiles.07 file. So file is equal to profile dot underscore 07.csv. And then the path is actually going to be a combination of a couple things. It's going to be my current directory, right? Plus the data folder, right? Because my current directory is S3, and then the data folder is a subdirectory, and then I'm targeting this file. So I'm going to say file name, which gives me like the full qualified path, is equal to os.path.join cur path data folder and file for the file name. So like now I have a fully qualified path. Okay, now let's go ahead and open the file. So say data equals open file name, and I like to use RB for read binary. that way it handles, you know, all types of files and you get like funky errors. I think this is probably the most safest or most efficient anyway. And then we're going to load the data into S3. In order to do that, we'll just type client.upload file. And then we have to specify the file, the fully qualified path, which file we're uploading, right? That's why we're using file name. Then the bucket that we're going to target, which is this specific bucket, or this one here anyway, this empty bucket. And then give the you know, give the name of give the file a name once it reaches a bucket. And so since we saved the file name before, we specified it before on its own, we can simply just have file. If or I can type a string, you know, I can say some random file.csv, and then that's how it would be named up there. But since I already saved it, since I already saved the file name as a variable, I'll just type file, and we'll save that. Now, one thing that I want you to notice, if you are in a UI, you can always use a terminal down here and execute it, especially if you set up your environment here. But if you didn't, then we'll just stick to the terminal. But so let me go to terminal here, and yeah, for some reason I keep on saving these files in downloads. So let me just move that one more time to S3. Okay, there we go. So I'll say Python 02 upload S3, hit enter. Here we go, no such file users. Let's find out what's going on here. So we have profiles. Oh, it should be profiles.07. My bad. That's what the name of the file. Let's try that one more time. And there we go, no errors. That means it uploaded, or should have anyway. And we'll refresh this with this little button. And now we see that we have profiles in here. Profiles_007.csv. Cool. All right. Thank you very much for watching. See you in the next video. Okay, so in this next video, I want to actually create a bucket using my code. So I will create a new file, and I will name this, let's see, I guess we can name it create bucket. So prefix it with a number, create bucket s3.py. Here we go. All right, so we won't need the OS library this time, or module this time, so we'll just use Bodo3 or Bodo3, however you're pronouncing it. We'll go ahead and instantiate our connection, or client. Client connection, and so we'll say client equals Bodo3.client S3. And remember, you can copy your code from like previous files, so you don't have to be typing it every time. But typing it does kind of get you, you know, used to like coding basically, and then just kind of makes that more of a visceral connection with your brain, right? So, but anyways, let's go ahead and set the bucket name. Set the new bucket name that we want to create. So we'll say bucket is equal to, you know what, I'm just going to pretty much give the same naming convention here. Oops. And but maybe just change it like to like 5,000 or something. Cool. And now we're going to create a new bucket, right? And this is just the command to create a new bucket. So we'll say client dot create bucket, and the parameter that, the parameter that we pass through is just the bucket with an uppercase B, and that's it. So that command will actually create a bucket in your console. So when you go through all your buckets here and you execute that command, what you should expect is to see S3 OSK bucket 5000, or whichever name you gave it, listed right here. Let's go ahead and just maybe take some of the code that we had before in order to retrieve the metadata and then display it on screen once we're done with that. Cool. And now we have all the code that we need. So let's run the third file. So Python 03 create bucket S3, hit enter. Voila, here we go, a list of all our buckets with the new or latest bucket name being the 5001. And if I go to my console and actually refresh this, I'll see that this bucket is here. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video. This next video, I actually want to show you how to create a folder, or excuse me, a subfolder within a bucket. But just interesting thing is though, actually a subfolder really isn't a subfolder within a bucket. It's actually considered an object. But you know, for simplicity and so that we can kind of connect things to what we're already familiar with, let's just call it subfolder, but knowing that it's actually an object in S3. So what I mean by that is if I go into like my S3 OSK bucket in here and I create a folder, I'm really actually creating an object. But this is, you know, saying folder name, and I think that just kind of keeps the connection, you know, in our mind. So I'll just call it test. And so here I see that I have like my test folder. So anyways, if so we'll just kind of keep using the terminology folder, but just know that it's interchangeable. And then if you ever see like the word object come up, you know that it can potentially, excuse me, mean a folder, or excuse me, a subfolder or an actual file within your S3 bucket. So okay, anyways, that being said, let's go ahead and get right to it. We're going to tinker with our S3 OSK bucket, the one where we uploaded our profiles 07, and then just add some subfolders to it. So let's go ahead and create a new file. And we call this 04 create subfolder.py. Okay, so we'll need to import our Botto3 library, instance, call that client instance, and so say client equals Botto3 client 3. And we'll say like our target, like we'll define some variables here, and we'll say our target bucket is s3.osk/bucket -3000, and of course your bucket name is going to be different, so just choose which target you want. And we'll give our subfolders some names, right? So we'll say subfolder 01 is equal to example, and we want to end it with like this / so that it can create the subfolder, and then subfolder 2 is equal to test folder. Okay, and I think that should be pretty much it. So now we're going to call our client, and we're going to use the put object method, or use the put object method, excuse me. And it's going to take two parameters actually. It's going to say which bucket do you want to put the object in, and that's going to be our target bucket. And then key is going to refer to like the object that we're going to place in there, and we're going to place our subfolder, right, object. So subfolder 1, and we'll do this for subfolder 2 as well. So like now when we go back to this inside this S3 bucket, not only will we see the profiles 007 CSV file, but we'll expect to see these two subfolders. Now in the past or recently we've been retrieving all or list of all the buckets, but this time we actually want to list the objects within a bucket. So I'm going to create a variable, call it all objects, and store the list objects methods response. And the parameter that it takes is bucket, and it's basically our target bucket. So we're saying list all the objects in our target bucket. So if we create these two subfolders, and it already has its profiles 007 there, we should get the profile 007 CSV file, and of course the two subfolders once we create these subfolders. So let me put some comments in here. Create subfolder object. Okay. Then retrieve object info from bucket. Okay, that's what we're doing. And so this again gives us like dictionary metadata, like we've seen in the past. So all we're going to do is just kind of like iterate through metadata and list objects. So we're going to say for A and all objects, and it's going to be contents print. We're going to print the key again, which will hold the name. And we're also going to print another piece of information of metadata, which is the last modified. And that's useful because like if you just start delving into and print like the all objects response, you'll see all the kind of data that you can like kind of extract and get from your objects, from your information, like from the data files that you're storing, right? From your files that you're storing in S3. So it's pretty nifty just to kind of explore that. So we're going to return the object's name, and then also the date that last modified, which is basically the day that the last date that we uploaded it, or whatever the last modified date happens to be. So we'll go ahead and save that. Go to our terminal, type Python 04 create subfolder, hit enter. Okay. Attribute error, S3 object has no attribute list objects. Oops, I'm sorry, list. Did I say list object? Oh, I meant list objects. There we go, with an S. Let's try that one more time. Okay, here we go. So now we created the example folder. We have this profiles CSV, and then we have this test folder. And if we go to our S3 bucket, the bucket 3000, and we refresh the contents, we see that we have exactly what we set out to have: example and test folder, and then of course the profiles 007 that we uploaded earlier. Okay, thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. See you in the next video. Alright, so in this next video, what I want to cover is actually downloading a file. And if you recall, we uploaded this profiles 007 into our 3000 folder. So let's go ahead and download that folder, or excuse me, that file into our downloads folder. So as you can see, my downloads folder is currently empty. There are no contents in it, so I'm going to want to download this profiles underscore 007 .csv file into that folder. So let's start by creating a new file, and I will call this 05 download file.py. Alright, so again, I'm going to need two libraries. One, my OS library, so I can set my path, and my Photo3. So client equals Photo3, then S3 to instantiate it. Then I want to set my path and other variables here. So let's say bucket is going to be the 3000 bucket. Where is it? Here we go. Actually, you know what? I'm going to recycle some of this information here that I have in my 02 upload S3 file. And you can do the same. This chunk where we put set variables, yeah, just go ahead and copy and paste that. That should be good. So we're defining the bucket that we're going to be downloading from. Again, we want to get the current path. The file that we want to get is profiles 007. And then the file name, we're actually, since we're going to save it not in the data folder, but in the downloads folder, we're going to type downloads. Right. And again, I'm seeing here that I messed up and I created this 05 download file in the downloads folder. So let me just exit out of that and then move it up into the main S3 folder. There we go. And I'll open it up one more time. Okay, we're good to go. All right, so now that we have those path and the variables that we need for when we save our data, I think now we can simply call our object method, method to download file, and we'll basically say client.download file. And this is actually going to take a couple of parameters. It's going to take bucket, which is going to be equal to our bucket key, which is going to be equal to the file name that we want to give it to when it downloads locally. And then, I'm sorry, the key, which means the file that we're getting from the bucket. I take that back. And then file name, which is going to equal to the file name where we're going to store it here locally. Okay, so again, bucket, where we are retrieving it from, key, the file that we're retrieving, and then file name for where we're storing it locally in the downloads folder. Okay, cool. Now, instead of listing the contents of the bucket, we're actually going to list the contents of our download directory. So we'll say downloads dir is equal to os.path.join current path downloads. So this is where this is basically we're saying the directory that we want to list the contents for. And so we'll say for root dirs and files in os.walk, and then our downloads dir, and we'll say for file name and file, print file name. So basically, I think I gave it well, I can probably give it a better name so it's not too confusing. Let's call it fn, just so we don't have like, I know even though like these variables are separate, just kind of keep them separate anyways. So basically we're saying we're going to walk through the downloads directory that we're defining here, which is this folder, and we're just going to kind of print out all the files, right, so that we can take a look at our contents once we download the file. And I mean, that's going to be pretty obvious, right, because we can simply just click on the downloads folder and see the file pop in. But anyways, we're just adding that code. Alright, so let's go to our terminal, and we're going to have a new file, this downloads file, that's what we're going to run. So Python 05, cool, and it printed the profiles 007 that was downloaded. And if we look into our downloads folder and expanded, you see this little icon that wasn't there before. Now we downloaded the profiles 007. I mean, and we can do that with any other file that we have up there, which actually I don't think we have it in the file. So yeah, we just have the profiles 007. So anyways, that is us downloading a file from a bucket. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. See you in the next video. If you found the content to be pretty straightforward, then I am excited that you feel that way. This next one is going to be a little bit more complex, simply because we're going to be doing something where we're deleting files from S3, but we are also going to delete files not from the main bucket path, but from a subdirectory. So for this, I'll need you to go over to your console, just for the sake of time, and basically go into your equivalent of my 3000 bucket, the bucket that we've been working on, where we created the example and test folder, and go ahead and click on example. And I want you to upload some files here. So I'm going to go to my Finder, and these CSV files that I have that I'll be linking, or any files that you have, just select like a handful, 4 or 5, or any number that you want, and go ahead and upload them to this example folder. So what we want to be able to do with Python is essentially target a subfolder and delete the contents, because you know, just like anything just like your laptop, basically, you're going to organize things in a certain way. Things are going to be in subfolders. They're not always going to be in the main folder. So let's just go ahead and practice coding some things that will help us basically delete these objects within like this example object. So as you remember, it's truly not really a folder, even though it's like kind of says folder here, but we want to be able to like, handle like these instances. All right, so if you did that, you'll have, these 4 files inside your example folder. Let's go ahead and start coding, and let's create a new file. Okay, and this one we will just call it 06 delete file s3.py. Okay, for this one we're only going to need the botto3 library, and as we've been doing, we'll instantiate our client. So we'll say client equals botto3 client s3. Okay. Let's go ahead and set the name of the bucket that we're targeting. So bucket equals S3 OSK bucket 3000, S3 OSK. And of course, your bucket name is going to be different because, as we know, you can't have the same bucket name that already exists. Okay, so let's take a first step and just list all the objects in the bucket, right? And it's the same thing that we did before. So I'm just going to say all objects equals client.list objects, and the parameter that we're going to pass it is bucket, and we're going to pretty much grab all the metadata for this bucket of the objects, right? Then we'll just print the contents basically. So I'll put a little message here so it's kind of easier to read in the console here. We'll say list of objects in, and I'll just put bucket here in our bucket. That way it looks like a nice, clean message here. So I'll say for A in all objects, and we're looking at the content specifically. Print a key which holds the object names. So contents is what it has, key is basically the name of it. Okay. And if I want to, I can actually just run that code right now to see what it gives me. So I'll do that, Python 06. And notice this time I'm doing an internal down here because it's just more convenient. But I'll use the other terminal for the remainder though. So Python 06 delete files. And what we're going to see is we're going to see all the listings of that of this bucket here. Example cities, Oscar_H female profiles, and so on. The test folder. These are all the objects within that bucket. So we know that's what we have. Now what I want to do is, because I'm going to be deleting multiple files within the bucket, and I'm really just interested in deleting everything that is in the example folder, I'm going to create a function, right? It's going to make it a lot easier for me to just kind of reuse the delete method for like this client instance. So I'm going to define a function, and then we'll call it del file, and I'm going to pass the file name over to it, right? So in here, I'm going to call the delete object function or method, however you want to call it. And the parameters that I'm passing are which bucket am I going to be deleting from, and then the key, which is going to be the file name, right? What I'm passing here. And that's pretty much it. If you see the squiggly line on yours, it's probably because you have like a PEP8 or some sort of formatting thing going on. So just put a comment here, function for deleting files. Okay. Next, I want to go ahead and just kind of list and then just make a note of which files are going to be deleted, right? So this is just more for us to kind of follow along with the program. And so I'm going to say print, let's see, list of files to be deleted. And in order to choose the files that I want to delete, I want to select all the ones that are under the example subdirectory. So I'm going to need to find a way to identify that. So let's go ahead and think about that here. We're actually going to have to get the metadata from the all objects. So we're going to say for A in all objects, inside contents, if the example object, or string rather, in the object listing, right, the object value that's being listed here, in a key, and let's see, a key is actually not equal to example /. And the reason we're doing that here is basically we're saying, like, if this substring of text is within this key value here, and this key value is not explicitly equal to example /, which means like our aka subfolder, or really the object, then we want to take an action, right? And so we're going to say print file to be deleted, then a key. All right, so we're going to say we're going to delete that file. Then we're actually going to instantiate call our method, and then actually delete the file. So we'll say delete file, and then a key, which is like what's holding the file name here. So as long as the string has the word example and it's not the actual example object or our subfolder in this case, we're going to delete it. So we're going to print a message saying that, hey, we're going to delete this, then we're actually going to delete it. So then after that, let's see, yeah, I guess we can just print another message and say files deleted, or deletion processed, I guess, whatever makes sense to you. And then we'll go ahead and call all objects again, or actually send a request to list all objects, client dot list objects bucket equals bucket. So basically we're going to list all the objects in that bucket after we've gone through and deleted the file, and then we will go on and list the objects one more time. And for that we can just reuse our code that we have up here. We don't have to like retype it or anything. Let's see, we'll call this refresh metadata. Okay, because we're bringing back all the objects information. Refresh object metadata. Just call that object metadata. And then we'll iterate through that through the objects, and then just kind of print out what's left. So if you recall, when we ran it earlier, we printed a list of all the things, all the files that are example. And then the next thing that we're doing is that we are creating a method or a function, excuse me, in order to delete the file names. So if like the object name has like the substring of example, right, just like this one does, and it's not the example subfolder itself, then we're going to go ahead and delete that object, and then we'll just provide a confirmation message and then refresh the metadata just to see what objects exist there to like kind of confirm the deletion. And then at the very end of that, we'll just kind of print out the contents again. And so basically we're going to expect for any of these 4 files to be deleted, and just for example, profiles.007, the test folder, to remain, right? Just like it did originally prior to us uploading the files. So I'm going to switch over to our terminal since that is just kind of a much larger screen. And I'll type Python. This is 07, right? I know it's 06. Delete files. Cool. And it did what it had to do. So first of all, it listed the objects in that bucket, right? All these that we're expecting. And then it just kind of gives you a quick confirmation, files to be deleted. And that is what was processed, deletion processed. And so like now the remaining list of objects in this bucket are example, profiles.csv, and test folder. And we can go to our console and just kind of take a look at this and then refresh, and we'll see that this is actually going to be empty. So let me close this out actually. Oh, well, actually by closing it out, it just takes me back to that example folder, and like we don't have any more objects. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Anyways, that is take your time to kind of digest that. I know it was a lot of information because we're using the metadata to kind of just identify these file names and all that other stuff. So again, if you have to actually print all objects, see that big dictionary, and then kind of parse through it yourself visually, definitely do that so that you can kind of understand how we're using that data and then incorporating it into our Python so that we can kind of process these functions or methods that are available in the client. Okay, anyways, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Our final lesson. In this last one, we are going to use Python to delete a bucket. So if you think about what we just did, we actually deleted some objects or files within S3 within a specific subfolder. If you kind of look back at the code and I ask you like the question, how would you delete all the contents within the subfolder? How would you do it, right? So if the answer doesn't immediately come to your head, pause the video, think about it, and then come back and listen to the answer. Alrighty, so if you gave it some thought, essentially here, when we listed all objects and then we had like kind of this filter where it basically looks for this example substring in the object name, we can essentially just get rid of this file, right? And essentially, or this if statement, this condition, and then just delete any file or object that is within the folder. And so that's key if you're ever going to actually delete a bucket that has contents, right? You actually have to delete all the objects or empty out the objects first before actually deleting the bucket. So that's definitely one way of doing it. There may be other ways, but just know that you would have to delete like the contents. And of course, probably the easiest way is just to go into the console and delete it there, and have to do less code. But anyways, at the end of the day, it's up to you, and this is how to do it programmatically. But that said, let's go ahead and move on to actually deleting a bucket in S3. So I will be creating a new file, and for this I will just simply call it delete bucket. What number are we on? Okay, so it's going to be 07, delete bucket S3. And again, we'll need our Botto library, instantiate client. So I'll say client equals Botto3.client S3. Okay, now our target bucket, let's just put some variables here. I'm going to choose to delete this empty bucket, right? So I don't have to go through the whole rigmarole of deleting the like any underlying files. So I just want to go ahead and delete this empty bucket that does not have any objects in it. So S3 OSK empty bucket. And feel free to delete and create a new bucket if you have all your buckets with some content. Just create a new one for the sake of testing this out. Okay, so then we want to go ahead and retrieve the bucket list. And this is just so that we can kind of see the contents before and after we go ahead and delete it, right? So we're going to say response equals client dot list buckets for n in response, and this is probably already becoming pretty well ingrained in your head since we're using this constantly. We're going to get the bucket name, so we're going to print name, print the bucket name, and let's actually just stop right there and execute that code. And I'm just going to execute it here locally because it's more efficient. So Python 07. And so here it gives me a list of all my current existing buckets, and the one that I'm targeting for deletion, is this empty bucket, S3 OSK empty bucket. Okay. So now the function is actually pretty straightforward. Client.delete bucket, and the argument that we have to pass is just bucket. So we'll pass that value, and then we'll retrieve the bucket information one more time and just kind of print that out. And so we'll see, give me 1 second here, sorry about that. Let's see, let's print a quick message here. Remaining buckets, sorry. Okay. Bad health warning. Means I gotta go to sleep. Alright, so here we are. After we delete the bucket that we're going after, we're gonna list the bucket contents again. And so we should basically see the same list minus this item here. So let's go ahead and go to our terminal and run that. Python 07, delete buckets. Here we go. All right, so if you see here, this is our bucket list before we deleted empty bucket. And then after we deleted empty bucket, this is our new bucket list. So empty bucket is gone. And if I go to my console and refresh, empty bucket is no more. There you go. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much for checking out this introduction video to AWS S3 and how to, AWS S3 and really using Python to use AWS S3. So hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for completing the course. I hope you came out of this like feeling very comfortable and confident with using Python and interfacing with S3 through your scripting with Python. Just a couple of final takeaways. I understand that most people are here because they want to basically grow their personal skills, their technical skills, and look for that career growth. So I definitely acknowledge and applaud that. I also recommend that you continue to expand your current knowledge outside of your technical know-how. So learn about business, learn about anthropology, sociology, philosophy, just various other kind of things that are just going to build that whole complete person so that you can tackle things from different perspectives and creative ways. I also encourage you to build good relationships at work. You never know when you'll need to collaborate with someone, so just having that trust really will help help you with your projects or with any collaboration, because that trust will already be kind of built in and nurtured as you build good relationships even with people that you might not expect to work with in the future. And definitely understand your business and high level goals. This will keep you pointed in the right direction in terms of what work you do and how you apply your expertise and skill sets. I do have additional resources if you guys ever want to check out my YouTube channel. It's noted below, so check that out if you're curious about more technical topics. And that's about it. And within the course, I'll link a couple of other resources and some files. But anyways, thank you very much for taking this course. I appreciate it if you can leave a rating and feedback if you find any. I guess if you have any recommendations on improvement, or even if you just want to say, kudos, and say that you like the course, then that works too. All right, thank you very much, and have a blessed year.